The night had swallowed the town in a heavy silence broken only by the relentless drumming of rain. It poured in sheets against the cracked asphalt, running down the gutters like silver veins. Daniel Reeves gripped the steering wheel of his old Ford truck as the wipers fought to keep up, their rhythmic squeak echoing inside the cab. He was bone-tired after a 12-hour shift at the auto shop, his hands stained with grease, his body aching from bending under hoods all day, but the thought of getting home to his son, Tommy, was enough to keep him going. In the back seat, Tommy, 8 years old and all freckles and dreams, had dozed off under a worn blanket, his small head lolling against the window. As Daniel rounded the corner of Maple and 3rd Street, his headlights caught something small and still near the curb. At first, he thought it was just trash blown by the storm, but as he slowed down, he saw movement, a small figure crouched under a flickering street lamp. His gut clenched. He pulled over, stepping out into the freezing downpour. The rain soaked through his flannel shirt instantly, and the chill bit through his skin. "Hey," he called out, his voice raised over the wind. "You okay?" The figure flinched and turned toward him. It was a little girl, no older than 6 or 7, her clothes drenched, her hair plastered to her cheeks. She was hugging a torn pink backpack tightly to her chest, her lips trembling. Her shoes were mismatched, her knees scraped raw. "Don't hurt me," she whimpered, backing away slightly. Daniel froze, then crouched down, lowering his voice. "Hey, it's okay, sweetheart. I'm not gonna hurt you. My name's Daniel." He offered his hand, palm up, gentle and steady. The girl hesitated, her eyes, big, blue, and filled with fear, searching his face. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Lila," she whispered after a moment. "I can't find my mom." The words were so small, so broken, they hit him like a punch to the chest. He glanced around, empty streets, no cars, no houses with lights on. Whoever she belonged to wasn't anywhere near here. "Come on," he said finally. "Let's get you warm. My son's in the truck." She hesitated again, then took his hand. It was ice-cold and trembling. Daniel led her to the truck, opened the passenger door, and helped her climb in. Tommy stirred in the back seat, blinking sleepily. "Dad? Who's that?" Daniel glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Her name's Lila. She's lost. We're gonna help her, okay?" Tommy nodded without hesitation and reached forward to hand her his blanket. "Here. It's warm." Lila looked at him shyly and took it. Back at home, Daniel quickly set to work. He handed her a towel and one of Tommy's old pajama sets, then made her a mug of hot cocoa. Lila sipped quietly, her small hands trembling as she held the cup. When he asked where she lived, she frowned. "We were in a car," she said slowly. "A big one. Then there were men shouting, and I ran. I got lost." Daniel felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. That didn't sound like a simple case of a kid wandering off. He called the police, explaining the situation. The officer on the line promised to check missing child reports and send someone by in the morning. Daniel hung up, glancing at Lila, now curled up on the couch under a blanket, fast asleep. Tommy had fallen asleep beside her, his hand resting protectively near hers. Daniel sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the rain streaking down the window. His old house felt quieter than ever. Somewhere out there, a mother was missing her child, but something about this didn't feel ordinary. The girl had fear in her eyes that went deeper than being lost. It was the kind of fear that came from seeing something no child should ever see. As lightning flashed outside, Daniel sighed and rubbed his temples. He didn't know who Lila really was or where she came from, but one thing was clear, she needed him tonight. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt like fate had put her in his path for a reason, one that was only just beginning to unfold. "You said. Give me generate a story of chapter 2 in 600 words in complete paragraph." ChatGPT said. Chapter 2, a stranger's voice on the phone. Morning came slowly, gray and wet, as if the storm had left behind a hangover the world couldn't shake off. The sound of rain had softened to a steady drizzle, and the smell of damp earth filled Daniel Reeves' small kitchen. He moved quietly, trying not to wake the two kids still asleep on the couch. Lila had curled up against Tommy during the night, and the sight made something inside him ache, a strange mix of protectiveness and fear. She looked peaceful now, but he couldn't forget the terror in her eyes the night before. Daniel brewed a pot of coffee and sat at the table, scrolling through his old phone, hoping for an update from the police. Nothing yet. They'd said they were checking missing child reports, but he knew how these things went, slow, tangled in paperwork and delays. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, when a small voice broke the silence. "Is it morning?" He turned to see Lila sitting up, her hair a soft tangle of gold. She looked smaller in the oversized pajamas, clutching the blanket like a shield. "Yeah, kiddo," he said gently. "You hungry?" She nodded. Tommy stirred beside her and yawned, grinning when he saw her awake. "I told you Dad makes the best pancakes," he said proudly. Daniel chuckled. "That's because you eat them faster than I can make them." For a few minutes, the kitchen was warm with laughter, the smell of batter sizzling on the pan, the sound of rain tapping against the window. But when Daniel asked again about her mom, the light in Lila's face dimmed. "We were in a car," she said slowly, frowning as if trying to remember. "There were men talking, then the car stopped, and my mom told me to run. She said, 'Don't look back.'" Her eyes glistened. "I ran and ran until I couldn't see her anymore." Daniel froze. "Did you see the men's faces?" She shook her head. "Just their suits." That detail alone made his stomach twist. Suits. This wasn't just a lost child situation. Something darker was underneath it. He called the police again, but before the call connected, his phone buzzed with a new number, private. "Hello," he answered cautiously. "Mr. Reeves?" A woman's voice, smooth, calm, and commanding, came through the line. It carried an edge of exhaustion, but also authority. "You have something that belongs to me." Daniel's chest tightened. "Who is this?" There was a pause. "My name is Evelyn Montgomery. The girl you found, her name is Lila Montgomery. She's my daughter." For a moment, Daniel couldn't speak. The name hit him like a truck. Evelyn Montgomery. The billionaire businesswoman who owned Montgomery Holdings, the name plastered on skyscrapers and charity boards. "You're saying she's your daughter?" he asked carefully. "Yes," Evelyn said firmly. "She went missing yesterday. We've been searching for her everywhere. I need her brought home immediately." Daniel frowned, staring at Lila as she played with Tommy's crayons at the table. "She's been through a lot." She said there were men chasing her. There was silence on the other end, just the sound of a measured breath. "There are things you don't understand, Mr. Reeves," Evelyn said finally, her tone sharpening. "A car will arrive to collect her in an hour. Please be ready." Daniel's instincts screamed. Something in her voice wasn't right. She didn't sound like a desperate mother, she sounded like a CEO making a transaction. "Maybe you should come yourself," he said firmly. "She's scared. She needs her mom, not strangers in suits." There was another long pause. When Evelyn spoke again, her tone was quiet but icy. "You're a good man for helping her. But you have no idea what you've stepped into." The line went dead. Daniel sat there, phone still in his hand, heart pounding. Outside, the rain picked up again, wind whistling through the cracks of the old house. He glanced toward Lila, her small hands moving a crayon across paper, drawing a house with 3 stick figures beneath a sun. When he looked closer, he saw something that made him shiver. One of the stick figures was crossed out in black. He didn't know what kind of danger Lila was in, or why a billionaire's daughter had ended up on his street in the middle of the night, but one thing was certain now. Whatever Evelyn Montgomery's story was, it wasn't the whole truth. And Daniel Reeves was no longer just a bystander. He was part of something much bigger, and much more dangerous, than he ever imagined. You said. Give me generate a story of chapter 3 in 600 words in complete paragraph. ChatGPT said. Chapter 3, The Billionaire at His Door. By the time the evening shadows crept across the walls, Daniel Reeves had nearly worn a groove in the floor from pacing. Every sound outside made his nerves twitch, the distant hum of an engine, the crunch of gravel, even the soft tick of the kitchen clock. He couldn't shake the woman's voice from his mind, Evelyn Montgomery. The way she spoke wasn't how a terrified mother sounded, it was controlled, deliberate, almost strategic. Tommy and Lila were in the living room watching a cartoon, their laughter soft and innocent, a small bubble of normalcy in the growing tension. Daniel stood by the window, arms crossed, waiting for the black car she'd promised would come. When it finally appeared, its headlights cut through the dusk like twin blades of white. The sleek black SUV glided to a stop in front of his small, weathered house. Daniel's pulse quickened as two men in dark suits stepped out, followed by a woman who looked like she'd stepped straight out of a magazine. Evelyn Montgomery was even more striking in person, tall, poised, and radiating authority. Her gray coat shimmered faintly under the porch light, and her expression was unreadable as her sharp eyes swept over the humble surroundings. Daniel met her at the door, his jaw tight. "Ms. Montgomery," he said, his tone cautious but firm. "You found us." "I always find what I'm looking for," she replied smoothly, her voice calm but laced with fatigue. Then her gaze shifted past him, and her composure cracked for just a second. "Lila," she whispered. The little girl froze halfway down the hall, clutching Tommy's hand. When she saw Evelyn, she didn't smile or run into her arms. Instead, she hid behind Daniel's leg, trembling. "I don't want to go," she whispered, barely audible. Evelyn's expression softened, guilt flickering across her face. "Sweetheart," she said gently, crouching a little. "Mommy's here now. You're safe." But Lila shook her head, pressing herself closer to Daniel. The man looked from one to the other, a knot tightening in his chest. "She's terrified," he said quietly. "You can't just waltz in here and expect her to be okay." Evelyn straightened, her businesslike mask slipping back into place. "She's been through a trauma, Mr. Reeves. I have specialists who can help her. This environment isn't safe." Daniel interrupted, bristling. "She's been safe here all day. I think that's more than your specialists managed." For a moment, their eyes locked, a battle of wills. Then Evelyn dismissed her guards with a wave of her hand, signaling them to wait outside. "You're right," she admitted softly. "She doesn't trust easily. That's my fault." Her voice wavered for the first time. "But you have to understand, people are after her. After me." Daniel frowned. She said men were chasing her. She didn't seem to know why. Evelyn hesitated. Then, after a deep breath, she said, "Lila's father was involved in something dangerous. Something that spilled over into my world. He was taken from us because of it. The men who grabbed her last night were trying to get to me." Daniel's mind raced. "So you're saying this is about money? Power?" "It's always about power," she said bitterly. Before he could respond, a sudden flicker of light outside caught his attention, headlights. Another car. Evelyn's demeanor changed instantly. Her voice dropped to a sharp whisper. "They found us." Daniel's instincts took over. "Get the kids in the back room," he ordered. Evelyn turned, scooping Lila into her arms, her face pale. "You're not armed, are you?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "No. But I don't need to be." He grabbed the old baseball bat from behind the door and motioned for Tommy to stay quiet. The sound of footsteps crunched outside, slow, deliberate, getting closer. Evelyn's guards moved toward the door just as the first window shattered. Daniel swung hard as a masked man lunged through the opening, the bat connecting with a sickening thud. Evelyn screamed for her daughter as another man tried to force the door open. For a few terrifying minutes, chaos reigned, rain, shouts, glass, the thump of bodies hitting the floor. Then, just as suddenly as it began, sirens wailed in the distance. The attackers fled into the storm. Evelyn stood trembling, clutching Lila tightly. Daniel's chest heaved as he dropped the bat, his arms shaking. The house was wrecked, shattered glass, overturned furniture, rain pooling on the floor, but everyone was alive. Evelyn met his eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "You just saved my daughter's life." Daniel stared at her, trying to steady his breathing. "You mean our lives," he said grimly. Then, quieter, "You need to tell me everything. Right now." And for the first time that night, Evelyn Montgomery looked like someone who didn't have all the answers. "You said. Give me generate a story of chapter 4 in 600 words in complete paragraph." ChatGPT said. Chapter 4, The Shocking Truth. The storm had finally passed by morning, but the air inside Daniel Reeves' small home still trembled with the aftershocks of the night before. The living room was a wreck, shattered glass scattered across the floor, furniture overturned, the scent of wet wood and smoke lingering in the air. Lila sat wrapped in a blanket on the couch, her little hands gripping a cup of cocoa that had long since gone cold. Tommy stayed close to her side, quiet and wide-eyed, while Evelyn Montgomery stood near the window, speaking softly to the police officers who had arrived at dawn. Her voice, though calm, carried the unmistakable weight of fear. Daniel leaned against the kitchen counter, his body sore, his knuckles bruised. He still couldn't believe what had happened. Men with guns, in his home, because of this woman and her secrets. When the officers finally left, Evelyn turned toward him, her perfect composure slipping away. "They won't stop," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. "Not until they get what they want." Daniel's jaw tightened. "And what do they want?" She hesitated, her blue eyes flickering with something like guilt. "They want me," she said quietly. "And Lila. She's the only leverage they have left." Daniel frowned. "You said her father was involved in something dangerous. Who was he, Evelyn? What's really going on here?" Evelyn exhaled shakily, her shoulders trembling. "Lila's father was a man named Nathan Cole," she began. "He used to work for my company. Brilliant, kind, but he discovered something: financial corruption, powerful people laundering money through our subsidiaries. When he confronted them, they made him disappear. I tried to protect him, but it was too late. And when I went public with the truth, they turned their attention to me." Daniel stared at her, the pieces slowly falling into place. "So you've been running ever since?" She nodded. "Yes. But I underestimated how far they'd go. I thought keeping Lila hidden was enough. I thought I could build a fortress of money and power around her. But she slipped away that night, and ended up in your world." Daniel looked at Lila, her small figure curled beside Tommy, her eyes half closed from exhaustion. "She didn't just slip away," he said quietly. "She was sent to me. I think she was running towards something she didn't even understand." Evelyn looked at him sharply, confusion flickering across her face. "Why would she run to you? You're a stranger." Daniel's lips parted, then hesitated. He didn't know how to explain it, how the moment he saw that little girl in the rain, something deep in his chest had pulled taut, like a memory he couldn't reach. "I don't know," he admitted softly. "But she trusts me." Evelyn moved closer, studying his face, and for the first time, her mask truly cracked. Her gaze softened, her breath catching. "You don't remember me, do you?" Daniel blinked. "What?" She smiled sadly. 8 years ago. Chicago. It was raining, and my car broke down near the bridge. You were the mechanic who stopped to help me. We talked for hours. You said something that night that stayed with me. You said, sometimes the broken things are worth fixing most. The world seemed to tilt beneath him. Memories, faint but undeniable, flashed through his mind, her laughter, the way she'd looked at him through the rain, the warmth of her hand. He'd thought about her for months after that night, but she'd vanished before he could find her again. Evelyn's voice broke the silence. A month later, I found out I was pregnant. I didn't tell you because my world was already dangerous. I thought keeping Lila away would protect her, and you. Daniel's throat tightened as he looked toward the couch. Lila's golden hair, her blue eyes, the same eyes he'd once seen in Evelyn's. He stumbled back a step, the truth slamming into him. You're saying. She's your daughter, Daniel, Evelyn said softly. Lila is ours. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the broken clock on the wall. Then Daniel walked over and knelt beside Lila, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She stirred, her small fingers finding his hand even in sleep. The connection was undeniable now, something deeper than coincidence, something written into his very soul. Evelyn knelt beside them, tears streaking her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. For leaving you. For keeping her from you. Daniel shook his head slowly, his voice rough but steady. You didn't keep her from me. You brought her back. As the morning light spilled through the broken window, it caught on the shards of glass, scattering tiny rainbows across the floor. For the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel like a man surviving on borrowed hope. He felt whole. Lila stirred and opened her eyes, looking between them. Are we safe now? She asked softly. Daniel smiled, his hand resting on her small shoulder. Yeah, sweetheart, he said, glancing at Evelyn with a look that carried both forgiveness and promise. We're safe. And we're going to stay that way, together.